Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation and use the chat box for if you have any problems or questions for the Q&A. The presentation will be recorded, but the Q&A will not. Links to the material and key points will be circulated post-event. If you would like an introduction or have a suggestion for future activity, email neelam.banks@ktn-uk.org. So a little bit of background to what this is. The Net Zero Place Innovation Network is to help make net zero in the UK a reality by working with local and regional authorities and their agencies to connect, collaborate, inform and share experiences of lessons learned and adopt innovation and levelling up across the UK. So we're delivering this in partnership with the Net Zero Hubs, Peter Goody, the Energy Project Manager of the Greater South East Network Hub, and has been really helpful in putting this programme together, and couldn't have done it without their help. So the purpose of this webinar is to answer the most difficult and common questions from local authorities about net zero heating, decarbonising home and the building of estates. This series is intended for local and regional authorities who have responsibility to meet net zero and want to hear good practice from specialists and hear other public sectors who have already addressed the issue. And I think hopefully we've got a really good session in that vein today. So we've had a number of sessions that are sort of halfway through, and the series of this one is really trying to integrate tech, how we can best use a combined range of technology to meet the issues. We've got technical modelling, grid constraints, and horizon scanning still to come. Okay, so without further ado, I will like to hand over to ICAX and Mark Hewitt, who's going to give us a discussion or a presentation about integrating solar and ground source. Mark, over to you.
Mike, thank you very much. Thank you to KTN for inviting me to take part in this webinar. So we're going to focus in this short presentation on integrating technology, specifically with respect to integrating technology with heat pumps. Just a quick bit of background about ICAX. We design, make, install, operate and maintain heat pump systems, and our focus is on ensuring the best long-term systems performance for our customers. Traditionally, our systems have been quite large scale for public sector, private sector buildings and groups of buildings. We are very much involved in system innovation and research and development to find the right engineering solution. It's obviously an exciting time in the evolution of heat pump technologies right now, and we're very much there and working in RD&I programs, forefront of renewable energy development in the UK. So I'm going to show a few projects just really to give a sense of the range of potential integration of technologies which can assist in efficiency. I guess the drive for efficiency has been particularly acute in the UK because of the spark gap between price of gas and price of electricity historically. It means that heat pumps are challenging, so, you know, if looking on the bright side of that problem, then there are, in a sense, it's a stimulus to technical innovation. So this is a project that we developed with London South Bank University and some other partners to look at an ambient temperature heat network. And there's lots and lots of bits of this, which there's certainly not time to go into in useful detail. But really, I just wanted to say that the key aspects of this project are understanding that for heat networks, heat rejection from cooling and other sources is incredibly useful for increasing overall system efficiencies. This project addresses the aquifers in London. Aquifers are an enormous energy storage source in the UK, as we know. Many of our cities are based on aquifers, not coincidentally. So understanding precisely how those aquifers work, what their potential is in terms of the macro scale, is really interesting. This project also has the capability to store energy in aquifers deliberately, and that's technically quite an interesting piece, because there are potable water questions, there are lots of other issues around aquifers, and using them, kind of layering up an additional capability, which is energy, active energy storage, is a very interesting thing to be able to do. At this point in time, so this project kicked off in 2016, there was a great deal of focus on demand side response, and the system that has been developed and installed here has the capability to do very sophisticated demand side response management of the capabilities within the system. So that's both the heat pumps and the large thermal stores are active for demand side response. I guess I probably share a fairly general disappointment around the level at which that DSR capability has kind of been really realised in the UK. I think there's much more to come there, and heat pumps and other systems, I think, can make a huge contribution to that. So this is a slightly easier to understand project in a way, because it's made a bit more simple. This is a project in Bristol. It's a community centre, and I guess what's interesting about this in terms of integrating technology is that when we developed the technical solution for this site, it was actually in relation to a kind of prompt from the then Department of Energy and Climate Change, who asked us if we could do something very specific based on our other technologies, which was to use heat pumps in the summertime, air source heat pumps, to store heat energy in the ground, based on some other things that we had done. And at that point, we said we thought we certainly could technically, and we developed a technical solution which does that very straightforwardly. But we couldn't necessarily see a business plan for that, or a business model, shall we say. And this is, this is a really nitty-gritty business model. It's a community building, so they have very constrained revenue costs issues. Interestingly, in the time it took to develop and install that program, it became kind of viable in a business sense, and this project provides incredibly low cost heat energy to the community by using summertime surplus electricity being generated on the building, you can see there, and the air source heat pump to create a enhanced temperature energy store in the ground, which is then used to provide very low cost, high efficiency heat through ground source means in the winter. So the technologies that we're integrating with our photovoltaics for surplus electrical energy generation and ground storage in the fabric of the ground, so thermal storage in the ground. So that's the kind of set of integrations. This is probably the project. This is a teeny little project, but maybe the one I want to focus on the most, because it has relevance, really, I think, to where we are today. So this is a little Victorian brick cottage in a very exposed part of Lincolnshire, so exposed that the most recent major storm blew its roof off, and we had to rebuild this roof. But it integrates a really interesting kind of very standard, in a sense, collection of domestically available technologies with photovoltaics, thermal, solar thermal panels, a DHW cylinder capable of accepting energy from solar thermal panels, a ground source heat pump with probes which can be charged from surplus energy from solar thermal panels, and a battery which is able to store the energy generated from the PV arrays. And we really did this project just to understand for ourselves and monitor what the interaction between all these technologies is and which ones kind of are most mutually assistive with respect to the end users' revenue costs. And in short, because we have much time, in short, the really key combinators are the PV and battery storage, and the heat pump together. They are fantastically efficient. This little graph on the right shows you how much energy we're storing in a really short time, that's a month, from using the PV, sorry, the solar thermal panels to store energy in the ground. So the long and the short of it is that in that combination of technologies, kind of sensibly coordinated in terms of their operation together, gives a net energy cost for this very exposed, rather poorly insulated building of £1.61 a day for all energy costs in 2021. So it's really a lesson in self-generation. And one point to make about that is that the building itself, as a kind of thermal mass object, should not be forgotten. That utilising the thermal mass in the building, which we do quite simply by putting some nice big radiators and running relatively low temperatures in there, is a really important part of that. I couldn't resist showing this project because Mike was involved in this project with us. Quite an interesting and complex array of technology integrations. Just in short, to say that that piece of black surface on the left is a solar collector which charges a borehole field, which allows the system to toggle choose between the most efficient heat pump input energy vector, whether that's the solar collector itself, which it very often is, or the borehole field, or an air source heat pump. So yeah, I think that's probably it. Just very briefly to say that technology integration is always part of heat pump installation. So here's a marine source project, and there we're exploiting the storage capacity of the sea, which is pretty good. And here we're exploiting the storage capacity of a river, which has much higher fluctuation. And here we're exploiting the storage capacity of the aquifer in another project. So heat pumps, by definition, are always integrating technologies, but the level at which you integrate them can have quite a significant impact overall on your system performance. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much, and great reminder of that interesting project at Suffolk there with the de-icing of the road, which was a slight benefit of it. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go to John Allen from the West Midlands Combined Authority. He's going to talk to us about how a story through integrating systems and his experience of doing that. So, John, over to you.
Hello. I just want to start. That was absolutely perfect from my point of view, because I did not want to come from this from a sort of technical standpoint and throwing specific examples. In a sense, I'm more interested in kind of like how we get to that point. But I guess it's best to start with who I am. So yeah, I'm Dr. John Allen. I even though this is sort of supported with the South East Hub, I am from the Southwest. energy hub. I run the PSDSS team, which is the Public Sector Decarbonisation Skills Service. So I'm sure with many of the public sector organisations out there, you're aware that we're right on the limit trying to get some Salix applications in at the moment. But it's still, this is really interesting. I'm really pleased to be able to come and talk about some of the experiences that I've had, just so you understand my background. I'm going to try and draw on a few different pieces, which is I come from an academic standpoint with a PhD in decentralized electricity generation. I've also worked at the National Trust heading up their renewables team for the south of England there, and done a bit in local authority, and obviously now moving into this public sector heat decarbonisation work. One of the things that I wanted to start with in terms of this is just please get the basics right. And I think this is one of the things in terms of in any piece of work that we're looking at. I will say I've only got one slide. There's not a lot else, so you can flick through them, but there's nothing else here. It's for me, the way that we approach these projects is initially understanding what the goal is, understanding, you know, if you're a local authority or an NHS group, anything like that, what is your goal? What is your net zero target, and how far along that road are you? In the sense of saying, one of the trick questions I often put in there is, are you aiming for net zero or carbon neutral? And if you don't know the answer, it's quite a clear example of understanding how far and how much information you've got down that road. And then in that sense, it's then understanding the portfolio. These are all very much back end things to really be concentrating on. And I know this is nothing to do with technology integration at the moment, but I just stress this so much. Understanding what you're trying to do. We're often speaking to a lot of organizations and just having to say, look, you don't have an idea of what your portfolio is, or you don't have an idea of what this, or more specifically, you've brought this site in. What are you trying to do on this site? We're looking at this single building, and it's like, well, hang on. And this is where that integration side comes in. Is that's great. You're looking at that one building on this huge campus site. What about the rest of it? Because what you need to be looking at is what are you doing on the whole site? Are there other options? What are the other options surrounding this as well? So, for instance, we're often missing out the fact that a certain area has a really good heat network delivery that's coming in the next few years. Heat networks can be a phenomenal asset, and especially if you are a large site, you're a huge asset to any kind of heat network that comes onto that. So just going to keep banging in there. Please just understand the site before you start looking at any kind of how you're going to approach that site, and how those sort of aspects you want to get them sort of essentially, like I say, sort of integrated. What are you looking at? And then once you've got an idea of the site, once you've got that benchmarking, and once you've got that sort of the basics out there, it's then down to what technologies are you looking at, what technologies are being discussed. And that's why I'm really pleased that Mark's come in and done that initial sort of a basis in terms of all the, that was a really good overview of lots of different technologies, lots of different possibilities that can go in and be delivered. But one of the things I just want to throw out a couple of examples that we've been dealing with, and one of the ones that comes up an awful lot is especially we're talking an awful lot about heat pumps at the moment, and that's very much government driven, but it's if you're going to combine that with another government issue, not government but national crisis in terms of cost of living, a basic calculation in terms of if you're going to replace your gas boiler with a heat pump, you're looking at, I'm going to go with the figures that I have here, which is, you're paying 7 pence per kilowatt for gas, you're going to pay 28 pence per kilowatt for electricity. Essentially, you're going to need a seasonal coefficient performance of 1 to 4 on your heat pump. It's going to be pretty hard to get on a retrofit heat pump in any building that you're looking at. So how are you going to balance that off? So essentially what I'm saying there is your solar heat pump is going to cost you more per year to run than your gas boiler is going to cost to run. So then that's where this integration comes in. That's where one of the easy ones to talk about is to look at solar PV. How does a solar PV then counterbalance that issue of of any kind of additional electricity demand. And then it's, you know, you then start driving in terms of batteries, in terms of these other options, in terms of, I mean, updating BMS systems is usually kind of the first go-to in terms in any building that we would initially be looking at, obviously energy efficiency strategies. And I'm just going to throw something out there in terms of PSDS at the moment. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this that much, but it doesn't support that well. I don't believe at the moment. I think there's a lot more work that could be done in terms of this integration. We talk about whole house applications, but if we can try and, you know, there is very much a higher focus on boiler replacement, on gas, they want to replace gas boilers, and that's what's going to provide the most amount of savings and the most amount of subsidy from that as well. But it does miss out this idea of how you're going to cost this out, how you're going to run that business case, and that needs to be thought about on the whole way through this. So one of the examples that I want to throw out there, because I'm going to send this back the other way, in the sense of a while ago I was asked to review a brand new building that was going up for a local authority. This is based down in the southwest, and as I was going through the documents, they'd identified direct panel radiators. Red flags to me. It seemed absolutely bizarre on a brand new building. Why would you just have electric panel radiators everywhere rather than installing any kind of low carbon generation? The question, it took me a while to find out any answer why, but one reason that came back was, well, we've got so much PV on the roof, then that's just going to cover it all. And this is where actually next week's going to come in quite well, which is I had to spend a lot of time trying to get somebody to model having a PV up against a solar panel, PV panel, get your half-hourly data against your energy consumption half-hourly data. The results came back with, actually, it doesn't touch the heating at all. There was an awful lot of solar. I can't remember the numbers because it was over a year ago we looked at this, but it pretty much covered your ancillary equipment, your heating, your lighting, your computer servers, everything like that was running within the building. So it doesn't match up that well. So you need to kind of, you know, that's where an additional, issue in terms of, can you sort of fulfill? What I'm trying to say is, when are you getting your most amount of solar? Middle of summer, during the day, your heating's not on. How do you get them to match up? And they match up by your additional technologies that you can run through that. So finding other ways of storing that energy, battery storage, any kind of heat storage that can be put in through that as well. They need to, that discussion needs to be thought about, and that needs to be organized from the outset, and understanding the difficulty with that is understanding the costs, understanding how much that's going to cost in terms of doing that upfront work, and what are those savings, who's going to tell you what those savings are. And this is the work that we're going through an awful lot at the moment. I did put a note in there in terms of saying, should everything be integrated? So this is where I just wanted to throw another example in here, which is, I used to work a lot in terms of biomass. Got a bit of a bad word at the moment. We used to do an awful lot of biomass for grade 1 to listed buildings that had an awful lot of forestry on the site as well. So it did make sense. But we often found we don't want to integrate the biomass into the heating system of the building. They didn't work very well talking to each other. It was far easier to split them off with a plate heat exchanger and operate them as completely two separate systems that just supplied each other. They told each other what was going on, but they were operated separately. And so it was just a sort of an interesting one of what, we found it, integration is not always, making sure everything talks to each other was important, but making sure that the building wasn't able to control the biomass boiler, that it's a different technology to how it should operate with the original gas boilers. So they needed to make sure that it was working in the smoothest form possible. And then it comes down to sort of what is the best place for innovation. And I think from my point of view, I think there's always a really good opportunity with everything that we're doing at the moment in terms of finding that innovation. But what I want to sort of highlight here is we see an awful lot of discussion over brand new technologies and brand new ideas that are coming through. And they always come with absolutely fantastic figures, numbers, and everything that comes through. So it's, for instance, 2 weeks ago, I was told about a new air source heat pump that effectively was working in cascade to provide a seasonal coverage performance of 4.5 to provide high temperature heating. And it's, you know, my mind alarm bells. So immediately I'm going to go back and actually get the figures, get the numbers, run the numbers that they're going through. You know, this was building an air source heat pump and a water source heat pump together to deliver high temperature heating. I still haven't had the figures. I'm still not sure how that's going to play out. But I think there is always a position in terms of how you're going to, you know, I just question everything that's being installed and making sure that that business case matches up to what they're talking about and what people are talking about in the first instance. I just think there's such a good position for this to come through, and from our point of view in terms of PSDS, that integration side is not there at the moment. It's not being delivered by, you know, how the PSDS funding is set out, but we need to tell them what we need. We need to identify how we're going to get that. We talk about whole building approach. How do we get that whole building approach set up to deliver a proper system that's going to run everything in the first case? Yeah, sorry, I hope that wasn't too rambly for everyone, or had some useful information in there, but please, you know, I'm guessing there's some people in the Southwest around here, and if you do have PSDS applications, I'm very happy to help. Always want to throw that one in at the end. That's it for me.
John, thank you very much for that. So we'll move on now to the questions. With it, there's quite a few questions come in. We'll stop the recording now so that we've just got the recording of the presentation itself.